Will the panel please come to the podium? The third member of our panel is Matt Lane. Matt is the Chief Information Officer for Janus Associates, the firm that I had, which is a national provider of information security consulting and services. He's assisted clients with technical and business security needs over a wide range of organizations, not-for-profits, governments, international organizations, for over 15 years. He's conducted many penetration tests, many assessments, and audits of complex security environments. And as a developer, he's developed significant contributions to biometric authentication systems, anonymous internet connectivity, and leading-edge solutions. He's a former instructor of advanced software engineering at Columbia University, and he has a certificate he's a certified information system security professional, which is a mouthful to get out. Put the word certificate with it. That's our panel for today. Now, what we're going to try to do is bring all of this back to what's going on in Connecticut today. You've heard at the federal level, you've heard Agent McBride talk about what the FBI is doing. You heard Rick talk about general policies and what you should be doing. In preparation for this seminar, the Connecticut Technology Council took a survey of Connecticut companies, and we're going to address a few of the top questions that came out of that survey. I think you might be surprised. First question, do you know or suspect that you have had a cybersecurity incident, such as an internal data theft or external data breach, in the previous 18 months? Look at how many companies said yes and how many said no. They either didn't or don't know that they had a breach. 88%. Agent McBride, would you say they haven't had a breach or they don't know?
I would say that they're unaware of a breach that has likely occurred, and it also depends on how you're defining a breach. It may be a minor breach or a big breach. And in the case of Anthem, you got to know what would be the cost of being ignorant that you've been breached. If the cost is low, maybe it's not a big deal you've been breached. If all your PII for all of your customers, including social security numbers, has gone out, that's a huge cost. And I don't know how companies like Anthem and Target and Home Depot are even absorbing these costs.
And in fact, in support of what Agent McBride says, Joseph Demarest, the Assistant Director of the FBI's Cyber Division, told the U.S. Senate hearing recently that the malware that was used would have slipped or probably got past 90% of internet defenses that are out there in private industry and would have challenged even state governments. A study by Verizon goes on to show that in 855 data breaches, 71% occurred with businesses with fewer than 100 employees. And not to leave out the large businesses, a survey performed by PricewaterhouseCoopers, 3 and 4, 77% of the respondents detected a cybersecurity event in the past 12 months. So I think we could probably say they are happening. Matt, you're out there actually looking at organizations. Do you think they know what's happening often?
I think in a lot of cases, I would say a year ago, if I asked the question, have you had a breach, people would say, you know what, we really don't have any information that anyone wants. I've heard that too many times. Or, you know, we just bought a new firewall 2 years ago, so we're probably pretty good. As some of the other speakers have talked about, the bad guys out there, they're not just looking for your secret sauce for your process. The fact that they own a computer in your environment and can use it as a stepping off point in the United States is really, really important to them. Also, they may just be sitting there listening and waiting and watching. I think that Mandiant report that came out, one of the shortest deployments of the AT&T threats was like a year and a half, some up to 5 years. And data was leaking out of the environment, you know, throughout that time. You know, the international actors were just sitting there waiting to see what would happen, when they could use that network. But I do think a lot has changed in the last year. You guys support me on this, we'll discuss. Now when I ask people like questions, are you secure? It's like, I bought this firewall, I bought this intrusion detection system, I have this, I just hired this, we just got, now how do I put it all together? So I think that things have really changed in the last year. People are starting to understand that that's happening. We also see a change in the type of data you were talking about. I had one client say, why am I keeping social security numbers and passport numbers? Why? Look, get them out of here. Get them out of here. Even if you have to go to the cloud, you get something written that our cloud provider is responsible for. Get them out of the network. It keeps us from being targeted.
Another question was, do you feel confident that you're properly prepared for a sophisticated cybersecurity incident, such as an attack or a breach? 44% of the respondents said yes, they were properly prepared. Rick, you talked about preparation. What do you think proper preparation consists of?
Yeah,
Let's add to your 5.
Let's start with the proposition that no matter how effectively you prepare your defenses against a data breach, you can't make yourself invulnerable. You know, some of my Fortune 100 clients, you know, what I consider to be the most sophisticated, right, the most prepared, would say, look, we know we can't prevent everything, but in the event of a data breach, each of you will minimize your legal liability by demonstrating that you took reasonable measures, right, to protect sensitive data. We're going to turn one of these off and see if we can stop the feedback. There we go. That you took reasonable measures to protect sensitive data from unauthorized use or disclosure. Right? As we study sort of the limited number of court cases that are out there, the most troubling cases seem to arise out of these claims of negligence. Right? Your actions in hindsight, right? Your preparatory actions or lack thereof are going to be judged by, you know, a jury of your peers. And the question you should ask yourself when you're asking whether you've prepared enough is whether this jury of your peers is going to agree that your conduct was reasonable under the circumstances. I think it's imperative, if you want to manage your risk and your liability, to begin focusing on preparation.
So Matt, what do you see out there with your clients that shows us that preparation is or is not occurring?
We've seen a major push from better and better improved training and awareness programs. I think that's really
We're going to talk about that in a minute.
Okay, so I'll stop there. But also, I'm starting to get pings from people to do disaster recovery tests based on incidents. There was kind of a gap. Let's say 10 years ago, everybody was talking about disaster recovery. 8 years ago, now there's a gap. People went, well, I bought this new SAN. It's going to do all the replication for me. It's going to take care of my disaster recovery needs. And now they're going, geez, disaster recovery is really more incident-based. So when the recipe to my industrial process is crypto-locked, how do I recover?
So knowing that proper procedures are very important, that training is very important, look at the results of the survey that we conducted with Connecticut-based businesses. No training at all, 42%. Not training at all as far as cybersecurity goes. And over 65% either trained not at all or only once, never again. So when we talk about process, Rick, procedures, this is not a procedure-based or process-based answer of what's going on in Connecticut today. So, Agent McBride, why don't you talk about what you see, if you can, with organizations that do training and those that don't? Is there a difference in what you're encountering out there?
There's a huge difference. The organizations that don't train are the ones I hear from. The organizations that do train are the ones I rarely hear from, if at all.
And I'm assuming you'd rather not hear from them because they're doing things right.
I prefer
Yes, certainly. Again, about a year ago, I would say people would come to me and say, well, we have this audit and I need to put a check in the checkbox that says I do training. And you'd be surprised at the calls I get like that for a lot of different things. And then about 6 months ago, I started saying, well, no, we really need a customized training program because we are really sort of worried about this. And now we're seeing, okay, I want a year-long plan with something to happen every 2 months. And that's a much more effective way of doing training and awareness, because that one-time training that you give someone when they start with the organization, it's going to change in 6 months. And it changes so quickly, you have to have a refresher course to catch all of it.
And Rick, from a legal standpoint, companies that train versus companies and organizations that don't train, do you see a difference?
The answer is yes, and one of the things you have to remember is when a data breach actually does occur, time isn't your friend, right? In the most recently reported cases, one of the most troubling aspects of those cases, at least according to the press, right, the court of public opinion, as I always like to call it, is the time that it took from the date that they knew a breach had occurred until the time that they began to report it to the affected consumers. And they are being torn apart. And if you go back and you look at a whole lot of these cases, you see the same thing. They're being torn apart because it took them so long. Now, was that a lack of training? I can't answer that question. With respect to some of the incidents that I've dealt with personally, I can tell you that, yes, a lack of training delayed the response and actually ended up costing the client a lot more in terms of the cost that they spent in remediating and addressing it. Perfect example. In one case, I can remember there was a data breach that occurred, and they didn't have a plan in place. They hadn't really thought this out in advance. And what did the IT people do? Right, they acted instinctively, and so they immediately shut down the server. Great breach, no more breach going on. They shut down the server, and they immediately wrote over everything that was on the server, backing up from a prior point in time. What they just did was they killed all of the forensic evidence that Agent McBride and the attorneys and everybody else needed to go through and figure out exactly what happened so that we could determine how bad the breach was. That cost that client a lot of money because they didn't know what had happened. And while the IT people thought they were doing the right thing, they weren't, and had they been trained, had they been drilled on this, I think the result would have been a lot better. Have you seen the same thing happen?
Yes, I have.
Are there any other points that you'd like to add as to what people should do?
What you should do is plan for a breach to occur, and then what are you going to do when that occurs? If you go to the blue pages and you look up the local FBI telephone numbers, 203-777-6311, your breach occurs, you call that number, you're talking to a switchboard person who has no idea what cybercrime means. Know ahead of time somebody that can handle your issue. You've come here today, you've now met me, so you call me directly. It doesn't have to be the FBI. The Secret Service has cybercrime experts. The state of Connecticut, not as many, but they do have some cybercrime experts. You may even be in a place where a local police officer has cybercrime experts. Find out, introduce yourself to people. If nobody else, contact the FBI Cyber Squad and say, I run X business, we have this many employees, we'd like to come talk to you. Face-to-face meeting, a little bit of trust, put that person's name into the plan, and then exercise the plan. And when you exercise your plan, part of the exercise should be to call those numbers that you got on your plan, because 16 months from now, I'm going to be retired. And if you call asking for Marty McBride, they're not going to know who I am, or they're going to say, oh, you're retired. So know who it is, and know that they're going to be there to answer the phone.
Matt, did you want to add to that?
Well, just say the question to you guys, we're talking about incident response, and what it takes to respond to an incident. Have you noticed this change in the last 6 to 8 months of the ostrich getting its head out of the sand a little bit? I mean, I've seen so many breaches where people go, oh, yes, maybe you can come over and help us, but when did you detect it? Oh, 2, 3 weeks ago. And it goes, great, can I see your logs? And the logs are being overwritten every 2 weeks. You know, exactly what you were saying, seen that. Have you noticed a shift in that? Has it changed, or is it still, maybe I'm just going to go out and buy a device and plug it in and there's a little green flashing lights on the back?
You want to
What's the question? You see the shift?
In the head of the sand.
No, I haven't really seen a shift. The problem is a lot of, especially the advanced persistent threat cases that we get, the company will notice it today, and when we do our investigation, we'll find out that they actually got originally hacked in 18 months ago.
I guess, and I suspect you've seen the same thing, I have seen a bit of a shift. And the shift is occurring because, again, the public is getting educated. About 18 months ago, maybe a little bit more, we tried to organize a program for the National Association of Corporate Directors to talk about and educate boards of directors on what their responsibilities were for focusing on this cyber threat that their companies face. And we had a great panel put together. We sent out notices, and like 2 people responded, right? So we canceled the program. Well, roll forward 18 months, and coming up in, I think next month sometime, we're putting on a program through National Association of Corporate Directors, and we already have 30 companies signed up with. These are officers and directors who want to come to the program. That's new. Well, you have to thank both the popular press, right, from driving down. How many of you were listening to NPR this morning as you were driving through traffic? I had a lot of time to sit in traffic driving down, and NPR was having a program on cybersecurity that started at 9 o'clock this morning. And every day you're now reading in the press these issues about cybersecurity. And I think that's bubbled up and made people a lot more focused on this, but they don't yet know exactly what they're supposed to do. Do we just plug this box in and now I can forget about it? And I think that's a mistake. I think it has to permeate beyond technology. And one of the things we always say is, look, this isn't a technology problem per se. You need to put together business people and compliance people and legal people and as well as the technology people, and put together a whole committee to address this holistically within your organization.
I agree with you totally, and I like very much what Congressman Himes said this morning about this being a human health, similar to a human health issue, and it's something to be managed, well managed, not to be forgotten and just left on its own. Our next question, do you feel that there's a chance you may suffer an internal or external data breach this year? Now, 40% said they're not sure. You have to wonder what the 40% is doing to try to make sure that they do know what's going on. 16% said yes, and 44% said no, they're not going to, they don't believe they're going to feel there's a chance that they may suffer a breach. In my mind, this indicates that Connecticut hasn't really gotten it yet. They don't understand that they're very much subject to things like this or a target. Agent McBride, could you shed some light on this kind of ostrich in the sand kind of attitude that we have in Connecticut?
I'll go back to the APT threat. People realize today they have a threat. They've been compromised 18 months ago. I would suggest that of those 40% that say no, probably 99% of them have some kind of a Trojan or something sitting in their network already that they haven't found. I would say to you, there are breach vectors that can be controlled by IT security, and there are breach vectors that cannot be controlled by IT security. Brute force attacks, IT security can handle those. Malware, hopefully IT security can handle that with somebody's not going to go browse the internet and bring malware into the company. So social engineering, other than training, there's no defense against social engineering. Email accounts, the man-in-the-middle email account attack I was talking about, security can't necessarily stop that unless you're really good at coding. And by coding, you can determine that the new email that's been inserted didn't come from where it should have come from. And if you don't have that kind of technology to detect that, nobody's going to see it. I use it as an example, apple.com. If you register app1e.com and you put that into the email, people of Apple, the real Apple, are not going to notice that in an email thread that they've been participating in for weeks. So you've got to train the masses. The weakest link is your greatest vulnerability.
Please join me in thanking our panel. We wanted to give you a view of the Cybersecurity Task Force in Connecticut. These are the people that are working hard to try to bring cybersecurity education and programs to you, all as volunteers, to try to help our organizations become stronger and better in the cybersecurity area. The next seminar will be in the New Haven area. We're trying to spread these out throughout the state, so it's not always so difficult to go one place. It will be at Frontier Communications, and we will have the State Attorney General, George Jepson. I always say Chuck Jepson because he's a neighbor of mine, his brother. That'll be June 3rd. We certainly hope that you will continue to want to come and that you will spread the word to others. We'll get, these programs will become stronger and stronger as we go. And we will have another one in the Hartford area later in the year, and leading up to an IT summit in the fall. The keynote will be about cybersecurity, so we all hope you'll actually want to come to that also. So thank you very much for your attendance. For the first time in seminars, having this kind of series. It's a very well attended seminar. Thank you.